Good morning, welcome to another video on my channel Hairlicious. If you guys are new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe because I will be talking about everything pertaining to hair loss, hair transplants, upcoming hair loss treatments, and possibly for a cure. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And today in this video, I wanted to talk about the topic of long hair FUE, also known as the unshaven FUE procedure. So before I actually jump into that, I wanted to let you guys know that I did create a Patreon for those who are actually able to support me. By no means am I pressuring you guys. If you guys are able, in a position to be able to support me, please make sure to check out the link below. I'm trying to get some more equipment so that I can make better videos and better quality videos. And there's going to be different perks depending on the amount that you guys can donate. So if you guys can't, please don't. I'm just very excited and happy for all the people that still, just watch my videos. So thank you for all of your support. And so in today's topic, I wanted to talk about FUEs when it comes to long hair procedures. So as you guys are aware, we have two different procedures. We have the FUE and the FUT, but today we are going to dive into FUEs and go ahead and kind of explore different types of procedures pertaining to FUEs, because we have the long hair where people that undergo an FUT have the option not to shave their donor zone, and what the doctor would do is they would actually extract the hairs from the back of the scalp without shaving it and then implant it directly into the recipient area. So there's a lot of pros and cons to this, obviously, versus the regular method where the doctor would end up shaving the back of the scalp and then manually extract the grafts and then implant it into the recipient area. And obviously we have the FUT, where the doctor pretty much cuts a strip from the back of the scalp, but that leaves a lot of scars. It leaves a linear scar from ear to ear, and that's why a lot of people opt for the FUE. But not a lot of people know about the non-shaven or the long hair method, so let's go ahead and talk about what it actually is. So most doctors actually, when it comes to FUEs, they end up shaving the back of the scalp, which is the donor zone. It actually creates a better visibility when it comes to extracting the hairs. There's lower transection rate, and then it's actually easier for doctors to look when they're actually extracting because they can see the exact angle of the hair without interfering with the long hairs. And so they normally shave it down to, like number 0 or number 1 clipper. And that's what I did in my case. When I went to Motion Clinic, I ended up shaving the back of my scalp and also the front portion of the recipient area, because the hairs would, kind of get in the way, and then the doctors just ended up shaving just a little bit or trimming so that they can have a better visibility when they were actually implanting the hair follicles into the frontal portion of my hairline. FUE for long hair is pretty much performed without shaving the back of the scalp, or you still cut it, but you still keep the length of the hairs as opposed to shaving it. And the length of the hair is usually anywhere from, a few millimeters to even as long as an inch or an inch and a half. It just depends on the skill of the doctor and what their preference is. So obviously the benefit of a long hair or unshaven FUE procedure is that you pretty much get a sneak peek of what it looks like, as opposed to waiting anywhere from 6 months to a full year to see the final results of your FUE procedure, or even just any type of hair transplant in general. For some people who don't really have the patience, this might be a viable option for them, and also you get to see how much density that your hair transplant is going to look like. Now, this is, take into consideration that you're going to get good yield as far as growth, and then that there's not going to be a whole lot of transection or lower transection rates. And so ultimately you get to pretty much get to see what it's going to look like, and also be able to kind of disguise your hair transplant, as opposed to a shaven hair transplant where the back of the scalp, you can totally see that all the hairs were extracted, and then when they do implant it, it's going to be still red. And then since the hair is really short or shaven, it's going to be a dead giveaway that a person actually has had a hair transplant. But just like any other hair transplant procedure, you do have to take into consideration that just because you had a long hair transplant does not mean that your hair is not going to fall out or it's not going to shed after around your 2 to 3 week mark, maybe your 4th week mark, because all transplants, for the most part, you are actually going to end up losing all the grafts that were implanted because you're going to go through the shedding phase. And about 3 to 4 months later, you're going to start to see new hair growth. So even if you do end up getting a long hair transplant, the hairs, wherever you get them implanted, is still going to fall out. So some of the cons when it comes to a long hair FUE procedure is that it's obviously going to make it a little bit more difficult to extract the grafts because the hairs are long. And also that's actually going to increase the cost and make it more expensive for you to opt for a long hair FUE procedure versus a short hair or shaven FUE procedure. It's also going to mean that it's going to be more labor intensive just because it's going to take a longer time to extract the grafts. Pretty much going to be limited to the number of grafts that can be extracted per day. I think the maximum that you can take out maybe about 1,000 versus if you do end up getting like an FUE procedure, you can extract anywhere from anywhere from 2, 3, 4,000 depending on the skill of the doctor. But you can obviously extract a lot more through a regular shaven FUE versus the unshaven or long hair procedure. So one of the issues or the cons when it comes to a long hair FUE procedure is that if you have a hair that's, let's say, about an inch versus something that's only a few centimeters or millimeters, it might be difficult to properly angle the punch when you're extracting, which might make the extraction a little bit more variable and less certain. And there's obviously the issue when it comes to transection rates, which might be an issue even just in general with FUE. But if you take into consideration using a long hair FUE procedure, that's just going to add on to some of the complications that you might see with an FUE procedure due to some of the stress and strain when it comes to extracting the grafts via FUE versus FUT. This isn't to say that all FUE procedures, whether it's long hair or short hair, unshaven or shaven, is going to yield a lower rate. It also depends on the skill of the doctor, and depending on who you go to, you might see better growth than other doctors. So you also have to take that into consideration. And so there's actually a scientific study that was done comparing shaven FUE versus a unshaven version of the FUE procedure for long hair. And in the study, there was 42 people who actually underwent an FUE procedure, and they had a hair transplant where both methods were used. And they compared the time to see how much time that it took to extract 50 grafts via FUE. And they also looked into the transection rate and also calculated density from the two different methods. The unshaven FUE procedure to extract 50 grafts took longer versus the shaved FUE method, and it took an estimated 3.4 minutes versus 2.6 minutes. And as far as transection rates, they were actually pretty similar depending on which procedure that you went with. We had 8.8% for non-shaven versus 7.5% for direct. So I mean, it's still a relatively high transection rate because that means that almost 10% of the hairs that are being extracted and implanted are not going to grow. So imagine if you have 2,000 grafts implanted into your hairline or whichever area that you're balding, that's about 200 hair follicles that are actually not going to grow. So you also have to kind of take that into consideration when you do end up getting an FUE. Obviously, in this study, it shows that the long hair FUE procedure has a higher transection rate in general because it also, like I said, it's going to depend on the skill of the doctor because, some doctors are more precise and better and more skilled than other doctors. But either way, you should expect that on average, transection rates for an FUE procedure would range anywhere from 5 to 10%. If you encounter a doctor that says that his transection rate for an FUE is going to be less than 5%. I mean, that might be true, but, based on average, it's gonna still be under, 10%. And if the doctor comes closer to claiming that it's gonna be closer to like 2 or 3%, I would be wary and just be a little bit more cautious, when proceeding with a hair transplant with that doctor. Now, the mean calculated density was significantly higher in the shaved method than the non-shaved method. We had 2.23 hairs per graft versus 2.15 hairs per graft. And this study was actually using 1 to 4 millimeter grafts in the non-shaven method compared to 0.4 to 0.8 millimeters in the shaved method. So in conclusion, depending on the proficiency and the skill and the preference of the doctors, non-shaven and also shaven methods can be useful techniques when it comes to hair transplantation. But in my opinion, I think that going for a shaved FUE procedure, like most doctors do, is going to be cheaper. It's going to be more effective. You're going to see lower transection rate, and the hairs are going to, even if you do end up getting a long hair transplant, it's still going to fall out. And you really just need patience to see the final results. It can take anywhere from 6 to maybe a year, even longer, but around the 6-month mark to 7-month mark, you should be able to see the final results and the density. And like I said, it's going to be a lot cheaper. So for long hair transplants, the only pros that I can see is that you kind of get a sneak preview of how the hair is going to turn out to be. But that's not always to say because transection rates, depending on how high or how low, can affect the final outcome of your hair. So if you guys were wondering, just go ahead and just do the regular shaved FUE procedure. But I will say this though, if you guys end up wanting to cover at least a small portion or the back portion of your donor zone after a hair transplant, you can always grow out the donor zone Like in my case, I'm trying to grow it out, right? So if you end up just growing it out long enough, then the doctor will pretty much just shave just a small portion on the back of your scalp to extract the hairs from the donor zone. And then using the hairs on top, you can go ahead and just cover it. So that's also another option. The only issue with that is that you're still going to be having a red scalp in the recipient area, and then depending on how short or long your hair is, you can also be able to just cover it out. So there you have it, guys. Long hair versus short hair FUE procedure. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. As you guys can tell, I am still continuing to grow out my hair. The hair right now is just a little bit messy because I just got back from the gym from a run. I just took a shower, so I really didn't get a chance to style it or anything like that. But the hairs are actually growing out pretty long, and I'm kind of liking how it's turning out. But yeah, I'm gonna continue to grow it out and then maybe get the sides trimmed, because some of you guys were saying that the hair kind of looks messy, and so I'm still gonna grow it out, but I might just do some type of just kind of cleaning around the sides, maybe cut the sides a little bit short, and in the back just do some type of touch up. But yeah, stay tuned for my next videos, guys. Make sure to subscribe and like this video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.